Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Thursday, July 24th, 2025, and you're listening to Alex's News. The high in Riverside today will reach 87.9 degrees, with a low of 63.8 degrees. It's a perfect day to enjoy the mild summer weather, perhaps a walk in the park or a picnic. Just remember to grab some water if you're out for a while. Coming up on Alex's News, we'll delve into the competitive challenges facing U.S. automakers because of a recent deal with Japan. We also examine the significant reasons behind Planned Parenthood California losing its funding. All these important stories and more are coming up on Alex's News. Stay tuned. We're going to kick things off this morning by diving into a trade dispute that's really driving a wedge between the White House and America's domestic automakers. A new agreement struck by the Trump administration with Japan, setting a 15% tariff on imported Japanese vehicles, is causing quite a stir. For more on this, we turn to our reporter Ethan. Ethan, tell us what's happening.
Grace, this is a situation where what sounds like a victory for one side is certainly not being perceived that way by the other. President Trump has touted this deal as a major win, but the so-called Big Three of American automakers, General Motors, Ford, and Stellantis, which is the parent company of brands like Jeep, are crying foul. They argue this 15% tariff on Japanese imports puts them at a profound competitive disadvantage, according to recent reporting from PBS NewsHour, KCRA 3 News, and the Boston Herald.
A competitive disadvantage, you say? What exactly is the core of their concern here? Isn't a tariff on imports supposed to help domestic industries?
That's the natural assumption, Grace, but that's precisely the crux of it. The issue isn't the tariff itself, but the perceived disparity. Matt Blunt, president of the American Automotive Policy Council, representing GM, Ford, and Stellantis, has been very vocal. He stated, as reported by PBS NewsHour, KCRA 3 News, and the Boston Herald, that this 15% tariff on Japanese auto imports is considerably lower than what U.S. automakers already contend with. For instance, American companies are currently hit with a 50% tariff on imported steel and aluminum, and a 25% tariff on many imported parts, and even some finished vehicles. So a 15% tariff for Japanese autos, even those with no U.S. content, feels like a steal of a deal for them, but a raw deal for American manufacturers.
I see. So while one hand is giving, the other feels like it's still taking, creating an uneven playing field. What is the administration's take on this? President Trump must have a reason for framing this as a success.
He certainly does, Grace. President Trump has presented this new trade framework as a huge triumph, predicting it will create hundreds of thousands of U.S. jobs, truly open the Japanese economy to American goods, and significantly help resolve the trade imbalance with Japan. This was detailed by PBS NewsHour and KCRA 3 News. It's important to note that this 15% tariff actually replaces a much higher 25% import tax that the administration had threatened to impose, starting on August 1st. Given today is July 24th, that would have been just 8 days away. The White House further indicated that Japan would invest $550 billion in U.S. projects and remove regulations hindering American vehicle sales in Japan.
That sounds incredibly promising on paper. But is the U.S. auto industry buying into the idea that they'll finally gain significant traction in the notoriously difficult Japanese market?
Not entirely, Grace. Skepticism is quite prevalent. Matt Blunt again expressed significant doubt, pointing out that foreign auto producers currently hold only about a 6% share of the Japanese market. That's a very tough nut to crack, as highlighted by both PBS NewsHour and KCRA 3 News. Carl Brower, an executive analyst at IC Cars, commented to PBS NewsHour that this agreement essentially provides Japan with a near-term operating cost advantage.
So our domestic automakers aren't exactly doing cartwheels over this deal. How about the Japanese auto industry? Are they more optimistic about this agreement?
They certainly are, Grace. An organization called Autos Drive America, which specifically represents major Japanese companies like Toyota, Honda, and Nissan, expressed considerable encouragement regarding this new trade framework, according to PBS NewsHour. They've actually urged the Trump administration to pursue similar agreements with other allies, specifically naming the European Union, South Korea, Canada, and Mexico. Interestingly, they also pointed out that their members have surpassed domestic automaker production for the past 2 years. While KCRA3 News reported that Toyota, Honda, and Nissan themselves didn't immediately comment, the collective stance from Autos Drive America provides their industry's generally positive perspective.
That certainly offers a different angle to consider. Is there any nuanced perspective that suggests this might not be all bad news for U.S. automakers in the long run?
There is, Grace. Sam Fiorani, a vice president at Auto Forecast Solutions, offered a more balanced view to both PBS NewsHour and KCRA3 News. While acknowledging the concerns of U.S. automakers, he pointed out a key practical detail: most high-volume Japanese models sold in the U.S. are already produced right here in North America. This means they would not actually be subject to the new 15% import tariff from Japan. Instead, they already operate under domestic cost structures that include those existing tariffs on steel, aluminum, and parts. He also suggested that future United States-Mexico-Canada agreement negotiations could potentially lead to tariffs no higher than 15% across the board.
So it's a complex web of tariffs, production locations, and future negotiations. What are the broader implications here?
The broader implications, Grace, are significant. This situation underscores the ongoing challenge of enforcing fair global trade rules and the very real potential for economic and political repercussions, particularly in states vital to the auto industry like Michigan and Wisconsin. As PBS NewsHour and KCRA3 News highlighted, the current setup leaves U.S. automakers feeling like they're on an uneven playing field.
Ethan, thank you for breaking down the nuts and bolts of this complex trade agreement. It certainly gives us a lot to chew on. And it's a story we'll keep following closely. Our thanks to PBS NewsHour, KCRA3 News, and the Boston Herald for their comprehensive reporting on this developing story. This has been Story 1 of 2 today. Welcome back, everyone. We begin our second story this morning with a significant development out of California, where Planned Parenthood is facing a substantial financial blow. For more on this, we turn to our reporter, Chloe, who has been following the story closely. Chloe, what's the latest?
Grace, it's a monumental hit for reproductive health care in the Golden State. Just yesterday, July 23, 2025, Planned Parenthood of California, or PPC, was dealt a heavy financial setback, losing approximately $300 million in federal funding. This stems from a preliminary court order in a lawsuit filed earlier this month by the Planned Parenthood Federation of America, or PPFA, against the Trump administration. This, according to reporting from CalMatters, LAist, and KFIAM 640.
$300 million is an enormous sum. What exactly caused this funding cut, Chloe?
It all boils down to a new federal law, Grace. It's officially known as H.R. 1, but it's more widely referred to as the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, or OBBBA. Its full legislative title is quite a mouthful. To provide for reconciliation pursuant to Title II of H.Con. Res. 14. This legislation, as detailed by Wikipedia, was sponsored by Republican Representative Jody Arrington of Texas and moved through Congress at a lightning pace this spring and early summer.
Can you walk us through that legislative journey? It sounds like it was quite the sprint.
It certainly was, Grace. The bill was introduced in the U.S. House of Representatives on May 20, 2025. Just 2 days later, on May 22, it passed the House by a razor-thin margin of 215 to 214, with one abstention. The Senate then passed it with an amendment on July 1, 2025, also by a narrow vote of 51 to 50. The House subsequently agreed to the Senate's amendment on July 3, 2025, in another close vote of 218 to 214. The very next day, on July 4, 2025, President Donald J. Trump signed the One Big Beautiful Bill Act into law, officially designated as Public Law No. 119-21.
So this bill became law just 20 days ago. What specifically in this act led to Planned Parenthood's funding cut?
The most controversial provision, and the one directly impacting Planned Parenthood, prohibits federal payments, including Medicaid reimbursements, to large nonprofit health clinics that provide abortions. For our viewers, Medicaid is a government program that provides healthcare coverage to millions of low-income Americans and people with disabilities. This provision specifically targets prohibited entities, such as organizations offering abortion services, by halting their federal payments for 1 year. While this is a major focus, it is important to note, as Wikipedia, America First Policy, American Immigration Council, and HR Block have all reported, that the One Big Beautiful Bill Act is a sweeping piece of legislation. It also includes significant changes to the tax code, making many of the 2017 Tax Cut and Jobs Act provisions permanent, introducing new tax deductions, and altering healthcare and immigration policies.
And Planned Parenthood quickly challenged this law. What did their lawsuit argue, and how did the court rule?
Indeed, Grace. The Planned Parenthood Federation of America filed a lawsuit against the Trump administration on July 7, 2025, arguing that the law violates their First Amendment rights and the Due Process Clause of the Fifth Amendment. Their core argument, according to CalMatters, LAist, and KFIAM 640, is that by allowing smaller, independent abortion providers to continue receiving federal funds, the act unconstitutionally defunds their services.
And the ruling came down just this week, correct?
That's right. On Monday night, around July 22 to 23, U.S. District Court Judge Indira Talwani issued a preliminary injunction that partially blocked the One Big Beautiful Bill Act from taking effect. Judge Talwani noted a, quote, substantial likelihood of success, end quote, for Planned Parenthood's arguments in the ongoing legal dispute, as reported by CalMatters and LAist. However, this is where the plot thickens for California. The relief granted by the judge's order was limited. It only applied to clinics that do not provide abortions, for instance, in states where it is banned, or smaller health centers that receive less than $800,000 in federal funds. This new order replaced a previous temporary restraining order issued on July 8, 2025, which had temporarily blocked the funding cut for all Planned Parenthood centers.
So this is where California gets caught in the crosshairs.
Precisely, Grace. Crucially, none of California's 114 Planned Parenthood health centers were included in this preliminary injunction. This means that all federal funding for Planned Parenthood affiliates of California has been halted, leading directly to that immediate loss of approximately $300 million, as confirmed by CalMatters, LAist, and KFIAM 640. It's a real funding fright for the organization.
That is absolutely devastating. What kind of impact will this $300 million funding cut have on California's healthcare landscape?
The impact is expected to be immediate and severe. Planned Parenthood of California serves over 1 million patients each year in the state, and a significant majority, about 80%, rely on Medi-Cal, which is California's Medicaid program. Jody Hicks, president and chief executive of Planned Parenthood Affiliates of California, stated to LAist that the funding loss, quote, jeopardizes the sexual and reproductive health clinic network's ability to keep its doors open throughout the state, end quote. Hicks further emphasized, according to CalMatters, LAist, KFIAM 640, and IJPR.org, that this cut will, quote, disproportionately impact people who have low incomes, rely on Medicaid programs, or have no other options for health care, end quote. Adding that, quote, the harsh reality is, the Planned Parenthood defund will be felt in every corner of the state, end quote.
So while Planned Parenthood is known for providing abortions, this funding cut affects a much broader range of services, correct?
Absolutely, Grace. While Planned Parenthood of California is recognized as the largest abortion provider in the state, abortions actually constitute a relatively small portion, less than 10% of its annual services, according to CalMatters and LAist. The vast majority of patient visits are for essential preventative and primary care, including contraceptive care, sexually transmitted infection testing and treatment, cancer screenings, and other general checkups. It's also important to remember that federal law already prohibits the use of federal dollars for abortions, except in extremely limited circumstances. So this isn't about federal funding for abortions. It's about funding for the entire spectrum of care.
What has been the federal response to this partial ruling, and what does the future hold for Planned Parenthood's funding?
The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, or HHS, criticized the court's partial ruling, stating, as reported by CalMatters, LAist, and KFIAM 640, that, quote, states should not be forced to fund organizations that have chosen political advocacy over patient care, end quote. HHS promptly filed a notice of appeal on Tuesday following the judge's order. Despite the immediate setback for California clinics, the National Planned Parenthood Federation remains hopeful that the court will block funding cuts for other members, including California's, in a future ruling.
California has historically been a strong proponent of reproductive rights. Has the state signaled any plans to step in and mitigate this funding loss?
California certainly has a strong commitment to reproductive rights, underscored by the fact that 2/3 of its voters approved adding abortion rights to the state constitution in 2022. Governor Gavin Newsom and other state and local officials had previously voiced strong opposition to the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Newsom's office, as noted by CA.gov, warned in late June 2025 that it could put an estimated $28 billion in federal health care funding at risk for the state. Local officials in Los Angeles also held a rally on July 21, 2025, just 3 days ago, to defend Planned Parenthood and warn of a potential public health crisis if the organization were to be defunded, as Fist.com reported. However, as of today, July 24, 2025, California state officials, including Governor Gavin Newsom and the state legislature, have not announced any specific actions or emergency funding plans to address this $300 million funding gap and prevent potential clinic closures. The immediate financial future for Planned Parenthood clinics in California remains precarious, leaving patients and providers in a state of apprehension. The situation is definitely still up in the air, or perhaps I should say, up in the legal appeals process.
A truly complex situation with widespread implications. Thank you, Chloe, for breaking down this very important story for us. We appreciate your excellent reporting.
My pleasure, Grace.
And that's our second story for this morning. Stay with us. We'll be right back after the break. Here are some other headlines. In Washington, the Trump administration is rebooting the nation's approach to artificial intelligence, unveiling a new AI action plan. The policy aims to accelerate development by cutting red tape, but it's also injecting the culture wars directly into the tech world. The plan rolls back a Biden-era executive order, replacing it with a quote, common-sense federal standard designed to combat what the administration terms woke AI. Influenced by tech industry figures like AI czar David Sachs, the policy explicitly removes references to diversity and misinformation, instead demanding that government AI be founded on so-called American values. It seems the administration is trying to debug the system of what it calls ideological bias, but critics worry this new code of conduct could delete important ethical guardrails and further politicize a transformative technology. Tensions are boiling over on the border between Thailand and Cambodia, erupting into deadly clashes that have left at least 9 civilians dead. Fighting broke out near the ancient Ta Moan and Ta Krabe temples in a disputed region. Both nations are blaming each other for starting the violence, which was reportedly triggered by a landmine explosion that injured a Thai soldier. In a sharp escalation, Thailand deployed F-16 fighter jets, while Cambodia is said to have fired rockets into Thai territory. This isn't a new conflict, but a violent new chapter in a decades-old territorial dispute, with civilians once again caught in the crossfire. Tragedy in the skies over Russia's Far East. An Antonov An-24 passenger plane, operated by Angara Airlines, has crashed in the remote Amur region, with all 49 people on board now presumed dead. The flight was on its final approach to the town of Tinda when contact was lost. A rescue helicopter spotted the burning fuselage of the nearly 50-year-old aircraft on a forested hillside, but reported no signs of survivors. Investigators are looking into a combination of poor weather and potential pilot error, but the crash is raising fresh concerns about the safety of Russia's aging aircraft fleet. In a major sign of shifting alliances in the Middle East, Syria and Saudi Arabia have inked landmark investment pacts valued at $6.4 billion. The 47 agreements, announced at a high-level forum in Damascus, signal a new era of economic cooperation as Syria seeks to rebuild its war-torn economy. The investments span critical sectors like energy, construction, and cybersecurity, with officials hoping to create around 200,000 jobs. The deals represent a significant political boost for Syria's new interim government under President Ahmad al-Sharaa and mark a dramatic turnaround in relations with Riyadh, which had been severed for over a decade. And finally, it looks like Tesla is hitting the brakes. The electric vehicle giant announced a 16% plunge in profits, its third straight quarterly decline. Many analysts say the company's stock is short-circuiting due to CEO Elon Musk's polarizing political activities, which are reportedly alienating potential buyers. One analyst now describes the once darling company as a, quote, toxic brand. Compounding the problem, Tesla is losing lucrative U.S. tax credits and facing stiffer competition from rivals like China's BYD. While Musk is pointing to future tech like robotaxis, he acknowledged the company could face a few rough quarters ahead. Tesla hopes a new, cheaper model due out later this year can help it get back in the fast lane. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Sonnet 4.0, Gemini Pro 2.5, Gemini Flash 2.5, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.